Welcome to the Soul Seeker podcast. I'm your host, Sam Kabert. I started this pod back in 2019 when I was taking my first steps on the path of remembering. And at the time, the tagline for the show was a journey of self-discovery. A year later, it became a journey of remembering. Yet, what I know now is back then, I was still seeking. And what I've come to know now is that it's the journey of seeking that brings us the silent, slow stillness of acceptance. And therein lies our own innate wisdom. It's my mission now to eradicate the glorification of hustle culture, as it was my drive in entrepreneurship that led to a greater whole, and that's because I was outsourcing my sovereignty rather than looking within. So let this be your invitation to take a deep breath in and remember that at any time we can shift our thoughts and our feelings to create the outer world in which we wish to live. Soul Seekers, it's time to grow. Let's go. Soul Seeker fam, what is up? It is your host, Sam Kabert, and I am pumped to bring you guys this episode with Kyle, wait for it, Kyle Nicolaides. I love saying that, Nicolaides. That's just a fun last name to say. He is Greek, and I'm pretty proud of myself for getting his last name pronunciation quite right, so that's cool. But in this episode, we're going to be chatting about his journey through his life, achieving his dream, and then realizing something's off and needing to make a shift. In a lot of ways, it parallels my own journey of finding success that I was chasing in business and then feeling more depressed than ever. And that's what led to ayahuasca and spirituality for me. And what you're going to hear in this episode is directly from Kyle, the story behind his amazing book called Thank God for Depression, and how despite achieving his dream of becoming a rock star, and y'all, when I say rock star, I mean it. He literally had a rock band. He's a guitarist. He's the front man. That means he's the singer and guitarist for a rock band. A lot of people, they just like throw out the word rock star. Like I've been told so many times in my career, you're a rock star, or I've said it about other people. And it's something we use like, oh, you crush, you're doing great, whatever it is. Kyle is a rock star. Literally, his band was called Beware of Darkness. They have toured the world, over 35 million streams of their songs. He appeared on Conan and was even in Rolling Stone. So when you hear from Kyle, know that his journey is going from rock star that achieved his dream, realized there was something wrong while he's creating a record and on tour, to making a change and doing something positive, living a life now where he is so much more in alignment, having done the shadow work and still currently doing the shadow work. So I'm stoked for you guys to hear directly from Kyle in this episode. If you're new to me, or if you want to go deeper with me, there are two ways. One of which is join my online free community. Did I say free? Yeah, I said free. It's called the Breath Club. It used to be a paid for membership, but I decided what's more important to me than anything else, what my heart's desire is to give back and to provide the tools and resources that have helped me so much. So if you want online community and learn how to regulate your nervous system, then check out the Breath Club. You can find more in the show notes. The other way is coaching. I do one-on-one coaching. And the latest offering is called the Breakthrough Session. It's a 6-hour, give or take, intensive where we're going deep into your psyche, then releasing all of that work, all of the old limiting beliefs and stories through a process called MER, mental emotional release, also known as timeline therapy, and then getting you on track with some relatable goals and building that dream vision so that you can experience that on a day-to-day basis. So hit me up if you're of interest to that. And as always, if you haven't left a review for the podcast, it just takes a few seconds to tap 5 stars, or frankly, however many stars you think this podcast deserves. And that just helps other people discover from discover the podcast and learn from these guests as well. So thank you so much for being here. And with that, enjoy this episode with Kyle Nicolaides. What up, and welcome back to another episode of the Soul Seeker podcast. I am stoked to drop in with Kyle Nicolaides. I mean, speaking of mirrors, this is going to be a fun one. But before we do, let's just drop in with some breath. So for all of you listening, I just recommend you breathe with us. You don't necessarily need to close your eyes. Be mindful of your environment. And for Kyle and I, we can go ahead and close down our eyes, allow ourselves to feel our feet on the floor, sitting straight up, and finding an inhale through the nose, letting the belly expand, bringing that breath all the way up. Through the mouth, audible sigh. Just arriving into this moment, inhaling up, letting the belly expand and bringing that breath all the way up. Sipping in a bit more air at the top, holding the breath here, rolling up the eyes. Audible exhale, let it go, let it go, let it go. Last one, through the nose, inhaling up. Sipping in a bit more air at the top. Just gently rolling up the eyes. And audible exhale. And flickering the eyes open. Here we are. It's going to be a fun episode. Kyle, my brother, how are you?
I'm a lot better now. What a beautiful way to start an interview, start a podcast.
Isn't it? Just kind of dropping in and getting resonance with one another,
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. How am I feeling? I'm feeling tender. I just had therapy, I just told you before, and I'm feeling light and I always get a little nervous before these. So
Well, big rock star guy. Well,
I
let's
know.
get into it. No, for sure, for sure. So for everyone listening, synchronicities. I've been going through a lot more depression, I would say, this year than I have, especially last year. And there was one time specifically, maybe a couple months ago or something, that I was scrolling through Facebook, and I'm barely on Facebook, and I saw a post by Blake Mycoskie, the founder of Tom's, where he was talking about this book that changed his life called Thank God for Depression. And when I was telling my mom about this book and the whole story behind it a couple of weeks ago, I maybe I heard you say it, or I don't remember the word my mom said. Maybe it was you or Blake said it on the podcast you guys did, that it's a provocative title. But at some point I heard someone say it's provocative title, and that's such a good way to put it. Thank God for Depression. That's the title of your book. And just to give a brief little intro and context, yeah, I saw that social media post, immediately bought the book, and it was like, damn, and partially due to the title and the awesome testimonial behind it. And just, I resonate deeply with your story and your approach to depression. And there's so many synchronicities or similarities, I should say, on our paths with being different avenues to get there. Me being business, you being musician, rock star. So for everyone listening, that may not be familiar with you, your work, or your band, beware of your former band, Beware of Darkness. Could you give us a little bit of the backstory of how it came to be that you fulfilled your dream as a rock star, what that looked like, and what led you to spirituality?
Yeah, of course. Um, I was 18 or 19 and I moved to LA and it was my dream to be a famous rock star, my dream to be a famous musician. And I was going to USC and I was very unhappy at USC. And I told my parents, like, hey, give me 6 months to figure this music thing out. If I don't figure it out after 6 months, I'll go back to school. So I dropped out of school. And I think this is a very important moment that I didn't stress enough in the book is when I dropped out of school, I moved to a little house in Eagle Rock, and it was the first time in my life I'd ever had space.
Mm.
And I'm writing a book on anxiety right now. I'm writing Thank God for Anxiety. And one of the parts about it is social conditioning, how the culture can create anxiety. And up until junior high to high school, there was so much pressure of you have to get perfect A's, you have to do sports, you have to do extracurricular activities, you have to donate your time to charities to get into the perfect college, to get the perfect job, to do all these things. And the pressure, the pressure, the pressure. So I think what happened when I dropped out of school was it was the first time that all the pressure disappeared, like externally. And I fell into one of the worst depressions of my life.
Mm.
It was like all the pent up anxiety, all the pent up energy. And I like to say I was 18 going on 95. Like I just felt like this world had nothing to offer me. I didn't want to be alive anymore. And at the same time, my music career took off, which was really confusing.
Yeah.
So right at the end of the 6 months, I got a record deal. I got a manager. I got an attorney, and then within a year, we made our first record, Orthodox, with Dave Sardi, who recorded Jet and Oasis and Wolf Mother, like all these dream bands. And as all this success happened, I remember having all these notches of like, this isn't how I thought it would feel like. Like I had expectations of, oh, making my first record was going to be fun, and it was the worst experience of my life.
Mm.
Oh, touring's going to be fun, and I was suicidal and going on stage and destroying guitars and being very abusive to myself. So I got all this success, like top five rock hit, played on Conan, was in Rolling Stone, toured the world with Smashing Pumpkins, the Struts, like all these bands, like living the dream. And toured for like 2.5 years straight, made money, like everyone's looking at me like, wow, you're a rock star, you made it. And my inner world was completely the opposite. I still felt like a failure. I felt like a fuck up. I felt like the worst person alive. I felt like a fraud. I had the same agent as Eminem, and he came up to me one time and he's like, you have the energy, like you have the talent, you have all of it. And I remember looking at him and I'm like, there's no way this could actually be true. Like my self-esteem, my self-worth was so low that anytime someone told me something about how good I was, the depression, the anxiety was like, nope, not true. So the short story is managed to limp through a couple more records, I think one. And by that time the anxiety had gotten so bad, the depression had gotten so bad, and we got offered a tour, and I clocked a moment of, oh, I'll take this just to do it. And it was such a sad moment for me because music was so sacred.
Mm.
And as soon as I clocked that moment of like, oh, just whatever, go do it just to do it, like I was like, this is done. I can't do this anymore. So then what happened was my entire identity was lead singer of a rock band. I propped myself up as that. And then when that disappeared, I had nowhere to put my identity. So it was the second time I was confronted with space. So, I went from touring the world to, playing shows to 40,000 people to being back in my parents' house. And my brain was so broken. A lot of the abuse and the trauma from the music industry was still rampant. So I started going to Goodwill and thrifting, and like I was afraid to tell people I was a musician. Like that's how bad it got. Like I didn't want anyone to know who I was. So then I bottomed out for like 2 years, I think, of just being suicidal daily, of having panic attacks nightly, of coping in all the wrong ways, of just living a really unhealthy lifestyle. And I managed to come out of it by getting sober. So I stopped drinking because that was one of the ways I didn't want to feel. I didn't want to, it was one of the ways I hid from my depression. And then as soon as I made that decision, the universe was like, okay, we're ready to help. And I got a therapist, I got um, some other help, and then that led to ayahuasca. So I won't tell you the whole story with that, but I drank ayahuasca and it wiped out 10 years of depression overnight. It helped me see the root of my depression. And the root of my depression was spiritual ignorance. It was, I had forgotten who I was. I'd forgotten that I am divine. I've forgotten the non-dual nature, and that every human is a unique piece of God walking around this planet, And then it showed me that the root of my depression was, it wasn't, oh, I don't have enough money. It wasn't anything material. It was all spiritual. It was, I had forgotten who I was, and I had forgotten my connection with God and divinity. And I call God Ma. So if I refer to Ma in this interview, that's what it means. So then that led to the next spark of, or having that healing with ayahuasca and depression. It made me think, if depression led me to a spiritual awakening, how is it a bad thing?
Mhm.
And that was a huge perspective shift. And then that sparked the idea of a book. So I kept drinking ayahuasca, I kept doing ceremonies, and she kept planting these little ideas of like, hey, you could write a kid's book one day. And I was like, what? I could be an author? And then 6 months after that ceremony, the idea for Thank God for Depression came out. So I wrote that book, didn't know how to write a book. No one, my career in the music industry, no one told me I could sing. Like no one was like, hey, you should be a singer, you should play guitar. Like I just did it. And it was the same thing with the book. Like read a bunch of books on how to write books and then wrote it. And I made the decision that I don't want anyone else muddying it. So I didn't want to do a publisher. I didn't want to bring anyone on. So managed to raise like $22,000 from over 200 people. And it was all fans of the rock band or just people who knew me or knew my struggle. And the incredible thing about that was no one had read a page. Like no one even knew I was a writer. I came out with a video and I said, hey guys, I just did this project. It's the most meaningful thing in my life. Like, please help me get it out. Like, let's try to help people's lives. So the idea with the book is, what if my 10 years of depression could be someone else's 3 months because of all the information in it? So that's led to a completely, different path for me. And I think it's as simple as like the rock band was ego and this is service. So in addition to that, I also play music and ayahuasca ceremonies, which has been the craziest side hustle of my life. And it's been very meaningful. And then I'm writing another book called Thank God for Anxiety. And it's the same sort of message of, here's a shamanic, psychedelic, spiritual approach to healing your anxiety. So that's me.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And just from a branding perspective, a marketer's dream, like just having a series, thank God for depression, thank God for anxiety, like that lines you up nicely. It reminds me of Amy Morn. Do you know who she is from Very Well Mind? She does like the 12 things mentally strong people do, or 12 things
Oh
you
yeah,
don't do. And she's got a ton of series like that. In my mind, a lot of times goes straight to marketing. But I notice a lot of
that's good
themes.
because I don't.
Yeah.
I don't.
Well, it's like my limiting beliefs coming up being like, okay, you've written 6 books and you don't have the continuity he's got.
Oh,
Like, and
that's
I'm
so
like,
funny
yeah, yeah. I'm like, okay, I
because
see you.
I'm the opposite. Like I'll make something and I'm like, I should probably sell this now. Like I should figure out a way to make money with this.
Yeah,
So,
that's great. I think a big part of this spiritual journey and reclaiming that spiritual aspect of ourselves, as you put it so elegantly, like having spiritual ignorance is reclaiming our inner artists. And you being a musician, that comes, I would imagine, quite easily for you. For me, I never thought of myself as an
mm,
artist, but then I started to be like, oh, wait, like my podcasts or the videos I was doing, and I've
yeah.
always liked to write, and like, oh, that's art too. So I think that's really important. And I have about an hour and a half left in listening to your book. It's about 7.5 hours. So I've listened to almost all of it and a couple of interviews you've done. It's fantastic. In there, I forget right now, but it's kind of obvious, like art. You talk about a few things, music and different things, but from your perspective, like how does art play a role in overcoming or accepting depression?
That's a really good question. Wow, that's a really good question. I'm floored you asked that. So the two
It,
things that are, huh?
Oh, I was just gonna say, because I think because you're such an artist, it might not be as obvious to you as it is to me, because like
Yeah,
that's who
well,
you are, perhaps.
I have different answers, and
Okay, cool.
I think that the first thing that comes up to me is that when we're talking about art and creativity, for me, it's a partnership with the divine. Like we're never making art alone, and we're tapping into a wisdom and an intelligence. So for me, anytime I'm working on a song or a book, I'm always asking the question, how do I serve you? Who do you want to be, and how can I help you be born? Because
Mm,
for me, it's about the song taking me on a journey, and it's about the book taking me on a journey. And every time I get into trouble is when my brain starts coming in and saying, you should be like this or it should be like this. And it's really unfair to the art. But I think I think there's an inherent wisdom to art. And even if you don't know what you're making, and the example I'm going to give is when I was depressed, if I look back at my journals from that time, this is pre-ayahuasca healing, all the lyrics were clear. They were clear as a bell what my deepest suffering was and what my deepest problems were on a subconscious level. Consciously, I couldn't see that. And that's the part that floors me every time is I look back and I'm like, some part of you knew that there was something deeply wrong and that you were craving from the deepest part of your being a spiritual connection, but you couldn't get it. So I think this, I think also with art and creativity is that it's going to meet you on the level you're at. So I think when people talk about the idea of the tortured artist, I think it's bullshit because for me, when I was depressed, I didn't want to make any art. I was just trying to survive. So in a lot of ways, art didn't help me. Like it's funny, the relationship I had to art and music, when I would try to do it when I was depressed, it would actually hurt me more because the mentalization would come in. What's wrong with you? Why can't you create? You know, it got so bad at one point, I would open my mouth and I couldn't even sing. Like no sound would come out. So I think that there's a Quincy Jones quote that's famous where it's something like the art you make is no more or less than who you are as a person. And I think it works like that with consciousness levels too, you know, where it's like, you know, I remember doing a yoga teacher training and taking time off from art to do some psychedelics and thinking like, oh, this is not going to affect my art. But then when I went back to art after doing all this personal healing, all the art got better. So, you know, I don't think you need to be depressed to make art. I think that actually healing the depression can help you make better art. Like, I don't think that they're tied. And I really don't like that idea that you have to suffer to make art because I don't think your art wants you to suffer either. Like there's a benevolent divine force and a benevolent God, and it's not saying, hey, you need to suffer and you need to, you know, sacrifice your entire being so you can make good art so other people can enjoy, but you can't be happy. It's like, no, your art wants you to be as happy as you can be, as, you know, materially fulfilled as you can be, as having the resources. So then you can make more art and help more people.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And you're coming from a more clear channel as well. And that's one thing I wanted to ask you. Like, as you're on this journey now of prioritizing spirituality, you know, what I would call soul life balance. I'm curious if there was a point, like after your ayahuasca ceremonies, where you're writing a song, writing your book, or any situation where you had like an aha moment being like, oh my God, like I, I'm channeling and I've been channeling my whole life. Yeah.
yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. Well, yeah, I love that you use that word. That's so cool. Well, here's the thing, like when I was 18, well, no, sorry, before I signed a record deal when I was in high school writing songs, I would channel through songs in minutes. Like I would channel a full song lyrics, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And then it was clear. The channel was clear. It wasn't like you could say it was spiritual, but at the time I wasn't using it as an offering or devotion. And then what happened was the music industry.
Mm.
So I had success, and then all these people were like, "Hey, you wrote this song. Can you write five more of this song?" Or like, "Hey, why did you write this song? This song's not very good. We need more of this." Or trauma. The last time I made a record, it nearly killed me. Why would I want to make a record? It didn't become safe to write songs. So, and then all these stories, people are like, why can't we get a record from you? And I'm like, because it doesn't feel safe and I don't want to record. So, what happened was I went from being an open channel to not being able to write songs, which was heartbreaking. And then I didn't know what trauma was. I didn't know what happened. So it would take me a month to write a verse, and then the verse wouldn't be very good. And I'm like, what's wrong with you? So get out of the music industry. And I think with creativity and channeling, it's all where you're coming from is what's the intention. And I think the aha moment for me was I had to do so much work, so many psychedelics, so much therapy, so much other inner work, the artist way, like 3 times, write. I had to write about it just to heal my creativity. It took like 6 or 7 years just to get back to a place of I can create safely. Because I think with creativity, do you know what rape is?
Oh yeah.
The medicine rape. So this is my favorite medicine to talk about because it's all about intention and creativity is all about intention. Because here you have this tobacco rape. It's a sacred tobacco. And I've had experiences where you use intention, you use prayer, you set a container, you basically use it as a ceremony. And I've had some of the deepest, beautiful, even visual experiences with it. And then I've also been in ceremonies where I see people hitting it like cocaine because it's so addictive. And I think creativity is the same way, where it's like, and there's no right or wrong here. And I'm not trying to be moral or judge or ethical. I'm just saying there's different ways of intention. So with creativity, you can use your mind and say, like, I need a song to serve my ego in some way. I need a hit. I need a song. If I write a good song, maybe it'll make me feel better about myself. So what's the intention coming from? And again, that's not a bad thing, And then there's the service and the connection with the divine song. Because sorry, there's the connection with the divine. Because I don't know about you, but like for me, having the spiritual experiences, having the connection with certain lineage practices, for me, I'm like, what else is there to sing about but Ma? What else is there to praise but the Divine Mother? And like that was a crazy shift for me too, because I'm like, wow, like I guess I'm writing these medicine songs now. And me and my
Mhm.
partner do that. And now we play ayahuasca ceremonies and we're channeling. Like we're just improvising for 20 minutes, whatever the room needs. And it's completely out of service and it's not out of ego. Like I'm not channeling to be like, look how good I am. So like someone can wake up the next day and be like, wow, that was a cool riff you played. So it's like subtle, but it's not subtle. But it's interesting because the world and the the economic industry of music does not channel, or sorry, I'm getting so excited now. The the music industry doesn't value some of the things that the spiritual realms with music do. And I've written about this because it's like, what is success in music? Like, is it
Mhm.
having 4 million streams? Like someone told me a story about his teacher in India. He plays some instrument and he can literally control the weather and like make it rain. And it's like,
Wow.
what? like he doesn't have a gold record, but like he's controlling material reality. So it's interesting. There's a lot of different avenues to explore with it.
Have you ever felt overwhelmed by emotions and unsure how to move through them? Sam created the Breath Club to help you find calm and clarity. In this free online community, Sam teaches how to regulate your nervous system through breathwork and process emotions effectively. Did you know that most emotions only last 90 seconds when you fully allow yourself to feel them? This is called the 90-second rule, and it's a powerful tool backed by science for emotional healing. Each week, Sam hosts live calls to guide breathwork practices and create real connection. You'll also get access to an online course and pre-recorded breathwork videos. The link to join is in the show notes.
Yeah, we start to redefine success and we start to think about it as well because it's not really a consideration before almost. And the intention between there's a few things coming through. I'll start with this. The movie Soul, you've seen that, right?
Mhm.
Fantastic movie, and I'm sure most of you listening have seen it, but in that movie they're talking about like being in the zone, and essentially when those musicians or athletes, how they show there's different ways to access the zone flow states, like that's when you're channeling from your higher self and you're in that vessel. I think it's just such a great visualization. And one of the things I was thinking about too is like, now I'm sure you're similar to me as this, like if you're writing your book or whatever, especially if there's a creative block and you're trying to like access that, you'll create the space, right? Like whether that's a little bit of a meditation, breath work, some incense, drawing cards, prayer, whatever, however woo you want to go on, we'll create the space for that. Is that something that you do? Yeah. And being a rock star before, you probably create the space when you're writing a song, but in a more destructive way, I would imagine, like on a subconscious level. Like maybe I'm going to have a few shots before I do this or whatever it is, you know?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's that I've never said this before, but it's not authentic because what I was doing was, well, here actually the first record was authentic because I wrote the first album thinking no one would hear it. So I just wrote music for me. I just made whatever I wanted to make. And then the second record, there was the intention of I want to be a rock star. I want to write these big riffs. Like I want to be cool. Like what would this person do? Like, comparing myself and like basically just not connecting with my body and with who I am. And the record didn't do well. People didn't really get it. People like it, but it's interesting because it's a fragmented version of myself.
And yeah, go ahead.
No, keep going.
This is where I wanted to take it, because this is something I struggle with too, like my message, right? Like my most
Yeah,
recent book, I tailored the message to be more accessible for corporate, you know?
yeah,
And I've struggled with this because on one hand, it's like show up as you, what
yeah.
you want to speak about. And then you're moving through the 3D world and it's kind of not being, it's like, it's not quite fitting. But then like in spiritual circles, we'll be like, well, it's not authentic because you're,
Mm,
well, in that sense, it would be authentic. Now, what I'm struggling is I've been like, okay, let me reevaluate my message and make it a little bit more accessible for most people. And then there's new challenges. But I do believe at the end of the day, like if it's something that you are truly passionate about, like we don't need to filter it for anyone. The audience will come, you know?
yeah, that's so
Yeah.
true. Like there's a there's a Rick Rubin quote I love that I'm gonna forget, but it's the best art divides the audience.
Mm,
And I dealt with that with my book too, because I'm talking about psychedelics and shamanism, and I'm entering a um, mental health arena full of therapists and Western psychologists, and I had so many feelings of fraud and so many feelings of, oh my God, who am I to be speaking on this stuff? But it made me double down of trusting my direct experience, and there's a voice and a place for it. And I think it's as simple as, I mean, what you just brought up, we could talk about for days. And like, I love talking about creativity and love talking about this, but like, I literally think it's as simple as like make art you want to make, like make art you love. Like
yeah.
what's the book that's not out there that you would want to read? And it's tricky. Making art is tricky because it's like all healing is like the Chinese finger trap, where it's
Mhm.
like, your finger's stuck and you wanted to have this certain impulse, and every time you do that, things get stuck. Um, and it's just relaxing in it, and it's scary because it takes trust, but I was just thinking about this because I'm in Mexico City and I've been writing my next book, and the less pressure I put on myself, the more I write. And the more honest I get, the more I'm like, oof, I don't really want to share this, but like maybe someone needs to hear it. Like that's the good stuff, and that's where the truth comes in.
Yeah.
But
Thank you for leaning into that.
and it is very confusing too, because it's like we are dealing with the material world and like things like success and other things that can weigh on the perceived judgment of an art
Mhm.
piece, but it's like if a book saves one person's life, um again, like I'm sorry, I've talked about this with music a lot too. It's like how do we ever judge things because we don't know where they're leading us to? It's like you don't know that the book you wrote that maybe it didn't have the success you wanted, you don't know where that's leading you.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, yeah, and there's parallels here. Like receiving. You mentioned you didn't use the word receiving, I don't think, but that's the way I interpreted it, and that's been a big theme for me as well. Like, I think I have 15 reviews on my new book that came out earlier this year, and my goal was like 30. Within the first few months, and it's almost like I can't receive those 15 because I'm like, no, I wanted 30 and I'm not able to be like 15 is absolutely amazing, or whatever it might
I
be. And
know.
yeah, we got to zoom out, right? Because the
No, I
pressures that
know.
you were talking about, like that you put on yourself for writing the book, right? Like I do that all the time with this little stuff. And then I work with Bufo ceremonies like how you work with ayahuasca, except I don't do music, but I'm part of those ceremonies. And when you're part of as many ceremonies as you and I have been, that's kind of becomes the cosmic joke of it all when we start to get lost in the pressures and stressors.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things that are very real of what you just said. So it's funny, I just had an entire therapy session about this before. Um, I think it's comparison. Like for me, it's comparison because like this is so funny. I was on your website and I was on another man, Luke's story, his
Mhm.
website, and I'm like, oh wow, like they public speak. And like I was reading both of your bios and I was like, wow, these guys are badasses. Like, oh man. And then I didn't realize it like flicked that trigger in me of like, I'm not enough. Like I need to go rewrite my bio, or like I need to go public speak now, or like I need to do these other things. And you're right. It's like it happened so quick that I didn't even register it, you know? And then like before I know it, all the gifts I have are not enough because I need to go do these other trainings and facilitations to make me feel worthy. And that's what death is as an artist, you know? And I think like it's wild because the internet is, I think the social media and the internet has been one of the most damaging things for artists because of that. Because every time we open our phones, we're seeing everything we're not. We're seeing other people. We're seeing their success. We're seeing their achievements. And then we compare it against our own. And then we have a whole process around that. And we have to come back to trust that, okay, my life path is completely unique of any other single person on this planet. Like I have my own story to tell. I have my own gifts to share. And I think that's the important thing with art too, is that everybody's an artist. Everyone's an artist. And um, there's a story I'm gonna write. I'm gonna share the story really quick because I think it's good. And I'm gonna write this in a book about creativity. But I played a Wachuma ceremony, and I had this. It was the first ceremony outside of the usual people that I sit with, and I had this whole like fear of I need to prove myself because what if I'm a fraud, you know? And the whole ceremony, I'm playing these songs, and I'm like, trying to get validation, trying to get some kind of like approval of like I'm good at channeling, like I'm good, I'm special. I'm not like other musicians, I'm special. And then what happened was I'm playing music, channeling, and then like people started joining me into a jam session and it like triggered me beyond belief. Like if you ever want to just drive me up the wall, just come up and be like, Kyle, do you want to jam? And I'm like, never. I never want to jam. That is the least fun thing to ever do in my life. So that started happening and I started getting more triggered because of this ego, this like, don't you know who I think I am? And then it stopped and there was this woman singing on a hill and she was singing so out of key, like a cappella, just like the worst thing you ever heard, the worst thing you've ever heard in your life. But I look down and I'm on a lot of Wachuma, she's on Wachuma, everyone's on Wachuma, and I look down at her and I literally see the woven fabric of prayer leaving her mouth, leaving her arms. I see white woven light wrapping the area, and I'm like, oh my God. Like, doesn't matter if we can't sing, doesn't matter if we're out of pitch, doesn't matter if we can't play the guitar. Ma, God, supreme consciousness, pure consciousness, whatever you want to call it, it's all a prayer, it's an offering, it's all about the heart. Literally, it's all about the heart. It's like, what is our devotion? How strong is our devotion? How strong is our love, our prayer? Like that's where the magic is. So I think with art, that's been a real revelation for me too, because it's like it's the mind is cool, technicality stuff is cool, whatever, that's all cool, but it's like, can you sing from your heart? Can you make art from your heart? Can you speak from that place? So
That's a great story. Yeah, thank you for
yeah, I'm
sharing
glad
that.
you like it. I think you're the first person I've told that. So
Yeah, a good little test. It's
mhm,
fun doing podcasts and sharing things, even just in conversations as you're writing, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a blast because I don't, yeah, like there's so many things where I'm like, I think this is a good story, and then I
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
like I have to test it on a friend, and then they cracked out. Like I have another one about getting a colonic, and it's a long story, but same same message. So
maybe not. We'll go there.
yeah,
We'll
we
see
all,
how this goes. I that's in the back of my mind because I was telling you I just did that 7-day fast cleanse
oh
where I
yeah,
was like cleaning out my intestines with
yeah,
mucoid plaque, and I was talking to
yeah.
my parents about colonics, and I didn't know they didn't need to do a colonoscopy. I guess you don't need to do that anymore. I'm like, wait, you guys you didn't do a colonoscopy? Well, what about a colonic? No, never did that. And I'm like,
Oh
well,
wow.
I did a colonic last year, only time. There's so much I want to talk about. Yeah, first of all, for myself, I'm just going to take a moment here and pat myself on the back and say received, because being in the same sentence of Luke's story, I will receive that, my
Oh
dude.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's cool. In respect to what that brought up with you, I mean, man, I found myself in a room full of professional speakers at Speakers Boot Camp in 2022 when I first wanted to get in speaking. And I thought it was for like new speakers because at the time I hadn't delivered one keynote yet. And I barely had any speaking in front of an audience. And everyone there was so polished, and like had been
Oh my
doing it
gosh.
for a long time. Yeah, that brought up a lot, but speaking is so much fun. I love that. And what we're talking about here, I had a mentor once say comparisonitis, and that's a perfect word for it because we're just constantly comparing ourselves to other people. And once we can bring conscious awareness that we now have the choice to shift that, but
It's
you
true.
know,
It's
that's
so
what it
it's
is for
so
me.
it can happen so quick though. Like that's the crazy part.
Dude, that's what my new book's all about. It's I sent you a copy. It's at your home address
Oh,
though.
amazing. Oh,
Yeah, you'll get a copy. It's
thank you.
kind of based, you're welcome, on the 90-second rule, which teaches us that we have a 90-second physiological response when we experience an emotion. So it's got 6 steps to actually process those emotions in real time, and you'll love those emotions. It's similar to what you talk about in a lot of ways. One thing I want to bring up, there's quite a few, but it's the word fraud. You've brought that up 3 times, once pre-ayahuasca, and then the other 2 times were situations post ayahuasca. So that seems to be a big theme for you. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I'm sure most people have what I've been taught that there's a certain amount of fears that humans can have, and some are stronger than others. And I think for me, it's the unworthiness, like I'm not good enough. And I've had Vedic astrologers tell me this, literally, that because of the alignments of my planets, nothing I do, I feel like enough, which is heartbreaking
Yeah.
because, like the review thing, like, 99 things could go well, but it's the one thing that goes wrong that I focus on.
Hmm.
And I think that if you zoom the camera way out from the karmic lens, we have to take on karmas to be in a body. And then there's certain lessons and certain things that we have to work out while we're in this body. And I think for me, one of the biggest ones is the worthiness. Like, I am actually a good person. Like that, like I didn't feel like I was a good person until I was 30-ish. Like I thought I was the worst person on the planet. And depression colored that, anxiety colored that. And it's just been a deep, I don't want to call it a wound, but it's just been a deep theme of mine of like feeling like other people are better than me, they know more than me, and it's been a slow. And then of course I'm like one of the most sensitive people of all times. Sorry, that was a great sentence for being a writer. I'm one of the most sensitive persons ever. That was. I hope you delete this from the podcast. You can not delete it. It's fine. I'm very sensitive. I am sensitive. So then it doesn't take a lot to get me off balance or unnerve me or stuff like that. So then it's like whatever stories I have of like I'm not worthy, it's like something small will happen and then there's evidence of like, oh yeah, I'm really not worthy. So personally it's been a long journey of slowly coming to believe like, oh okay, I have gifts to give, like I can bring positive things to this world, like I have an effect on people, like things like that. And it's been a journey. So
Yeah, that resonates. Unworthiness is the number one theme for myself. In fact, I did a 6-hour breakthrough session yesterday that I was facilitated through, with that being the greater problem. Shout out to you, Pamela King. Thank you for that session. And yeah, unworthiness, it's something that I've been addressing as well for wow, it seems like 4 years now when that first came about. And last year I got the idea to write a book called Mastering Worthiness. And I started to move forward with it. And then I put that project down because I felt like a fraud. You know, I was like, right?
yeah,
I was like, if I'm going to be writing a book on mastering worthiness, I got some work to do here, you know? But that is something that I intend on picking back up, whether title's something else or whatever, at some point when that feels in alignment. I'm curious, if you were to sit with the question, how is feeling unworthy serving you? What comes through? How is feeling unworthy actually serving you?
it's a good question. I mean, on one hand, I'd be like, it's not, but it's probably protecting me,
Do you think it contributes to your
protecting me
drive?
from getting hurt. Yeah, and that's what I've heard from multiple people, is that one of the magic parts about being in a human body and this material plane is that transformation is possible. And in order to transform, we need an irritant. So we need heat. We need some desire to change, or something that is so uncomfortable that it pops us. So I think, yes, for me, that has been um, it has inspired me. But it's this is really interesting what we're talking about, right? It's like there's even a
Mhm.
duality in this, right? Because there's, like, we talked about the channeling, where it's like I'm getting completely out of the way, and it's like I'm partnering with source. And then there's like the very human part of like, I don't feel like I'm enough and I have to do things, you know? But I think that side is getting um, less prominent, because what happens is I've done enough spiritual practice and enough meditations. When I start to act from that place, my body literally shuts down.
Mm.
Like if I tried to do any project out of like, I need to do this because I think I should do this, or because it'll make me feel better about myself, my whole body becomes gridlocked and I can't do it. So that's been the very interesting part too, is moving from ego into service, is that it's forcing me to be more in my body, because my body doesn't lie. Like I can
Mhm.
have all these ideas in my head about like, oh, I have a, you know, I was just talking to my therapist about this too. I'm like, I could do cacao group for men. I could do this. I could do these other things.
You could do what? A cacao
I
for
like,
men, you said?
I could hold a cacao ceremony for
Yeah.
men, or do men's work, or like do these other things. And then she's like, what about your body? And I'm like, oh, I could write books and make art. And then my body just went, you know? So it's like,
Yeah.
it's hard to be embodied. It's terrifying to be in a body sometimes. It Being a human is not for the weak at heart. The amount we have
No.
to, the amount we have to navigate, you know? So it's like I had to do a lot of work to be able to feel my body again. And then I'm feeling my body again. And I'm like, this is a lot, but it's also a very good compass. So
Yeah, embodiment specifically has been a big emphasis for me recently, because I've been seeing more and more how I've been slipping on like things that I teach or I talk about, and being like, when did I start to get off track on this for myself? So just making sure that I'm in integrity, I'm in alignment, and I am embodying these things, and then I feel better, and then the flow happens. Um, you mentioned being a human is not for the faint of heart. You know, in the first 2, 3 years of my journey post ayahuasca, it was like starseed this, starseed that, Dolores Cannon, you know, aliens, human origin story. And I found like that ended up being more of a dissociation from the human experience. Yeah.
yeah, well, because it's like we're in a human body to be human.
Hmm.
I love blasting off into space. I love doing ayahuasca. I love having visions and stuff, but we're not here to have 24-hour visions. We're here to learn what it means to be in a body. and it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
lot.
If you're looking for a powerful and transformative experience for your next event, consider bringing in Sam Kabert as a keynote speaker. Sam's message of soul life balance and his expertise in mental health and mindfulness resonate deeply with audiences. He not only inspires with his story, but also offers practical tools like breathwork to help attendees regulate their emotions and reconnect with themselves. You can even have Sam lead a guided breathwork journey, creating a truly unforgettable experience. To learn more or book Sam for your event, check out the link in the show notes to book a call with Sam now.
Man, I don't understand why my message of soul life balance hasn't taken off. It doesn't, like, even people that I thought it would resonate with, they still talk about work life balance, but like everything you're saying, that's why I speak on soul life balance, you
Well,
know?
I think you should keep talking about the message because I don't think a lot of people realize how strong the societal conditioning is. It's very strong, and it's very hard to break out of that and move against it
Mhm.
because we're talking about, I mean, America, like America's a pressure cooker, and even California, like I think the idea of success in California is you have to make it, which is be rich enough, be famous enough, like have a certain amount of wealth or prestige or fame. And then anything under that feels like you're a failure or you haven't made it, you know? So I think people just need to be educated about like who we actually are, what we're here to do. Because that's the, again, it's like, what is the context? Excuse me. What's the context you have and what perspective are you looking from? You know, because if you're looking from a perspective of I'm here to awaken, I'm here to learn lessons, I'm here to know God in a human body and do the practices to help me know myself as divine, then you're going to look at a path of, oh, I want to be a rock star is getting in the way of that, which is really interesting. But if you're here and you're totally locked into the material world and the game and saying, okay, I want to be a famous rock star, like, you know, I want to have gold records and sell a million copies and tour the world and sell at crowds, then you get that, that's fine. Like that's where you are in your spiritual path, you know. But then you get to the end of your life and you're gonna have to face death. And you know, you can't take any of that with you. So I think the spiritual, there's a I think that's where the spiritual path can give us meaning and hope and perspective is how do we be in a human body while knowing ourselves as divine and knowing everyone else is divine and knowing that this is a display. This is the totality limiting itself to come into form so we could have this experience for a certain reason. And some people are further along in their experiences and some people are, no, I don't want to say further along, but people are just in different places on their experiences, you know? And it's like, maybe it's not everyone's karma to wake up on this lifetime or do ayahuasca in this lifetime because we don't know what their karma is. We don't know what their past lives were. We don't know what the play is on that, you know? So that's also a really interesting thing is to, you know, is to be like, I have a mission for all these people to do this thing. And it's like, well, is that the divine mission? Is that God moving through you? Or is that like, you know, because I remember I was at a ceremony and someone asked my partner, I just wish everybody would wake up. Like, I just wish everybody would just, you know, have spiritual experiences. And she's like, no, you don't. She's like, no one could, she's like, no one would able, you know, no one would be able to run the grocery store or like, why would anyone want to make food or why would anyone want to do anything if everybody's awake on the planet? And I thought that was really interesting. So I don't know. That's
Yeah.
just that's some food for thought.
Well, one question or something I've been wanting to bring up was your band name, which you don't have the band anymore, but the rock band Beware of Darkness, you know, and you mentioned that a big part of your depression was being disconnected from your inner world to your higher self, your spirituality, your spiritual ignorance, all of that. Like that is the current state of our society. You know, the number one mental health disorder, according to the WHO, is anxiety, and depression is the second leading concern in the workplace alone. Like, it's no secret that we're facing a global mental health crisis, and as you saw in my TED talk, like, that's why I believe we're facing this mental health crisis, because we're disconnected from our inner world.
Yeah. Well, that's the truth, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
and I think
well, that's the
yeah.
truth, right? It's because everything is backwards. And I'm only going to speak to America because that's where I grew up, but it's again, it's like you have the conditioning, and I think that a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression is conditioning in a certain way. But you have the conditioning of saying success is this is what matters, and anything outside of that, you're a failure or you're not enough, or you know, um, or you don't matter. So it's like everyone's playing a game they can't win, and it's a game that doesn't really matter.
Yeah, totally.
And that's the heartbreaking part about it.
Hmm.
Because if you look at a country like India, where I'm not going to speak on India, I don't know anything about India, but if you look at other places in the world where they put spiritual practices before, they put goddess worship before, material life, it's really interesting. It's different. And I don't want to ramble, but yeah, and it's like no wonder the anxiety rates are so high. No wonder the depression rates are so high. And then you add technology on top of that. You add social media on top of that, where everybody's saying everything they're not, and no one has any, no one's taught about emotional regulation or what to do with emotions, especially men. Like men are told, don't cry, don't have emotions, don't be weak, don't be a pussy, all these things. So then you have men growing up completely out of their body, completely don't know what's happening, and it's like, it's just from the start, it's like we're not given a very good place to, you know, process or function from.
We're not, and this is
So
just coming through right now, but like, usually we talk about mental health. I've been working on saying mental and emotional health. Most times I say mental health, but I haven't really thought about this too much. But I feel like mental health is almost doing us a disservice, because part of the problem is we are so much in our minds, and just by like saying mental and emotional health, it's like like just emotional, like dude, I gave a presentation once called Overcoming Overwhelm about my 6-step breath process. At the end of it, this woman goes, you spoke a lot about feelings, but the things is, feelings don't have an intelligence. What do you have to say about that? Right? Yeah.
oh no.
Emotional intelligence. Come on. Like, clearly you don't got a no judgment, but shit, man. Um, anyways, though, something that I wanted to chat with you about was just the fact that your band's name was Beware of Darkness.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it was your band, to be clear, right? And then you formed the other members around you. Yeah. So like, you named the band, you mentioned smashing guitars on stage. You tell a story. uh, I'm not going to tell your story, but if you could just real quick tell us the story when you told, I think it might have been a manager or a record label person. Yeah. Could you tell us that?
Yeah. Yeah. I want to tell it, like, something is so present right now in my head that I want to speak
Hmm.
on before I get to that. And it's about emotions and mental health. And it's like they're one and the same. Like emotional health and mental health are the same thing, because how we process, like, the extent to how we process emotions, and that's repressing them or expressing them, directly correlates with our mental health. If we're not feeling our feelings, whether that's anger or sadness or fear, we're going to have anxiety and we're going to have depression. There's loads of ancient wisdom that say depression is just anger that can't hold its charge. It's repressed anger, and then it goes underground and turns into depression. And I know with myself, anytime I repress any feeling, panic attack comes out. And people go, "Oh, like I had a panic attack out of nowhere." And it's like, "Yeah, but did you clock your day of, like, you looked at your phone and you felt a certain feeling? Oh, don't want to feel this feeling. It's not safe. Drink caffeine. Now your body's buzzing with caffeine. You see a coworker, you see three other people, the meeting doesn't go well, you feel shame, you don't feel good about yourself. Instead of feeling those things, you reach for food, you check your phone, you just avoid your feelings all day, and then you go to sleep at night, and then bam, panic attack. And it's like it's out of nowhere. It's like, no, it's not out of nowhere. If we're
Yeah.
emotionally current, if we're current with our emotions, and I got to tell you, like a lot of my ayahuasca medicine experiences have been learning how to refeel. Like I've had nights where the medicine is rough, and it's like this is all the things you haven't felt in 10 years. And I've seen hundreds of people over their career of like working in ceremonies or attending ceremonies, and like a lot of them, it's like, wow, I had to feel these things I couldn't feel. And it's like when we don't feel things, they get stuck in our body, and it's energy. I think you said this in your TED talk. Emotions are energy, and they need to move. And when they get stuck in our body, it they get stored in our organs, and then it physically hurts us. So that's the little blurb I had to say. But
Love it.
the band story, I was making my first record, and I've been dreaming this my whole life. And I had a certain expectation of how it would be. Like I thought I would feel great. I thought I would be happy. I thought it would be amazing. I thought it'd be the best time of my life. And the first day we show up, and it was like engineer was not fun, like not a good dude. Started getting a bunch of weird messages from all the people we were working with. And I was having the worst time of my life. Like I didn't want to be in the studio. The band was stressed out. We were getting in fights, and I didn't feel safe. And the thing about creativity is you need to feel safe to express yourself. It's all about vulnerability. And I would express myself, and I'd get made fun of, or someone would talk shit, and it would just make me close up. So I didn't have any tools. I didn't know what to do. I shut down. I just took it. I didn't fight back. I didn't stand up for myself because I had literally no tool belt. And I shut down, and I didn't talk to anyone on my team. And then finally my manager hit me up, and he's like, bro, what's going on? Like, come to my office. Like, we need to talk. And I go to his office, drive, however long it was. And he's like, what's going on? He's like, in my 40 years of managing artists, I've never seen anyone as miserable as you making their first record. Like, what is happening? And all I knew to say was like, I think I'm depressed. Like, I think something's wrong with me. And I saw his body language shift and him go, a little tense. And he's like, if you're so depressed, just go kill yourself. And the feeling was so intense of everything sinking down. And it was just like the supreme validation of like, I am unworthy. I don't deserve to live. And it was almost like I blacked out, but I was still in my body. And it was like a waste of time because he's doing a business investment here. And it's like, it might not pay off because of my mental health. And it left a huge imprint on me that it took a lot of time to undo. And I got closure on it, and I understood why it had to happen, but it was really gnarly. And as a result, I didn't talk about my mental health with anyone because I thought, why would I do that? It's not safe. And that's the heartbreaking part, is that I could have got healing a year later if I told somebody, hey, I'm depressed, I'm suicidal. But I suffered through it for another 8 years. And it took me literally breaking down. It took me on my knees, crying, being so suicidal to get help. And the whole thing about depression and anxiety is it's not normalized. People don't talk about it. And then when it hits, people assume, oh my God, there's something so wrong with me, or my problems are so serious. No one could know how deep the suffering is, or no one could know how bad my problems are. And my message is like, don't make your depression or anxiety sacred. On one level, it's not special at all. Like there's nothing mysterious. There's nothing special about anxiety or depression. Like there's a reason why it's here. There's something you're doing or not doing that's causing it, or there's something that happened to you that's causing it. And on the flip side, there are things you can do that will get you out of it. There are things you can do that will heal you. It's not mysterious at all. And I think that it's very common for depressed people to feel so much shame, so much regret, and get so lost in their heads to think, I'm the only person that's ever felt like this. I'm beyond help. It's not true. It's not true. Like, and I can say that with 100% certainty. There are things you can do. We don't know what will bring you out of it, but that's where the journey is. That's where the adventure is, and that's where the magic is. And we talk about the unknown. The unknown is essential when it comes to healing with depression, because with anxiety and depression, our minds are limited in their thinking and in their consciousness. Like when we're depressed, a depressed brain cannot heal itself. An anxious brain cannot heal itself. We need external forces, whether that's an organized body of consciousness like ayahuasca or psilocybin or certain meditation practices. Like we need things outside of us with a greater charge to help us bring us out of it. So that's why it's so dangerous to not talk about your depression or your anxiety. And I argue that if you get the nightmare example like I got, that can happen, but there will be silver linings to it. It will hurt, but you still need to talk about your depression, because there's like, you just need one person to change your life. And I remember with the music industry, when I was trying to get a record deal, my friend Claudio would tell me, he's like, bro, you just need to get one person behind you who will champion you, and like that'll change everything. Like one phone call can change your life. And he was right. And mental health is no different. Like you just need to be at the right place at the right time and say, hey, I'm feeling depressed. And maybe someone will say, oh man, I just have this resource, or I just did this thing and it saved my life. Like, come try it. And that's the magic in the adventure, because you don't know where it's leading you.
Beautiful, brother. Thank you for sharing that story. And it's such a great place to wrap up. I mean, I could talk with you all day, and I'm sure we'll do this again. And we didn't even get a chance to talk about PTD, which I loved your concept of post-tour depression. Is that it? PTD? Did I say it right? Yeah. And for me, that resonates, where we have something we're working on, or we're so excited and it's a peak experience, and then going back to normal reality and being like, now what? Bottom line though, with depression, everything you just shared with suicide as well, myself being a survivor of suicide, that's definitely very important topic for me. If you're listening, if someone is listening here and you're feeling like you don't have a safe place to speak with other people about what's going on in your life, one thing that's important that Kyle mentions is don't just say that to anyone, as your example goes. So I invite you to consider joining my free online community. It's free. It's called the Breath Club, and it's a safe place to connect with like-minded people and learn how to regulate your nervous system. With that, Kyle, thank you so much. I'll put your Instagram, your website, and the book, Thank God for Depression, all in the show notes. Really appreciate you coming on the pod.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate you. Thanks for all the work you do too.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for checking out this podcast and listening to the very end. If you want to go deeper with Kyle, check out the show notes. You can find his website, his Instagram, and the direct link to get a copy of his book, not Beware of Darkness. That's his band's name. His book is called Thank God for Depression. I listened to Thank God for Depression on Audible. It's about 7.5 hours. I have about an hour and a half left. And I love listening to audibles. I feel like for me, when I read a book, if it's like a business type book or something, I really like to read. But for a book like this, self-help, which is most of the books that I engage with, I really enjoy audibles when the author is reading it. Not only is Kyle reading it, but he goes off script too. So that's kind of cool. And he's got an engaging tone as well. So I know you guys will enjoy that book if you enjoyed this episode. And speaking of enjoying this episode, if you haven't left the pod a 5-star review, please consider leaving a 5-star review, as it helps the show to grow. And I'd love to see you in my free online community called the Breath Club. You can join using the show notes. There's a link there. Other than that, I will see you on the next episode of the Soul Seeker podcast.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.